Hey, everybody. So, today we're going to talk about punctuation. And for some of you, this is probably review, and that's okay. And for some of you, this might be new, and that's okay too. We're here to learn to get more confident in our English speaking and our writing abilities. And right now, we're going to focus on ending punctuation, okay? Learning how to end your sentences the right way. And there's other types of punctuation that we'll learn about later in the semester, probably next semester, okay? So let's get into punctuation. And remember, what is punctuation? Punctuation is anything that we're using to write that's not a letter or a number. Everything else, that's punctuation. But right now, ending punctuation. So, this is a period. Starting simple. On your keyboard, this is where the period button is. Get familiar with it. Here's rule number one. Use a period to end a declarative sentence or statement. We use periods to end a declarative sentence or a complete sentence, that is, a statement. Here's what I mean. At the end of every single sentence that we use that is a declarative sentence, we got to have a period. At the end of your sentences, you need to have a period. Let me show you a really, really easy example. I have a dog. And that's true, by the way. Her name is Lucy. I have a dog. And the sentence ends with a period. Also, note right now, the period is right at the end of the sentence. There's no space. The period isn't over here hanging out by itself. Period's right here. I have a dog. Other examples could be Jason likes to sing or Monica turned in her homework. All properly capitalized, all with periods at the end of the sentence. Rule two, place the period at the end of a sentence with correct spacing. This is the biggest issue that I'm seeing with students right now. And I really want you to pay attention to rule number two. You need to place a period at the end of a sentence without leaving a space between the last word of the sentence and the period, meaning the period can't be off by itself. You also need to leave a space after the period and before starting your next sentence. I'm going to show you a few different examples of this, okay? So here we go. I have a dog. I just talked about this a half a second ago. This is incorrect. And it's incorrect because of this space right here. This little space makes your entire sentence wrong. So what I want you to realize is the details matter. So this is correct. I have a dog right here. I have a dog. Her name is Lucy. Does this look correct or incorrect? It's incorrect because there's no space. And by the way, if you type this sentence into your computer, there's a good chance that there's going to be those red squiggle lines. Those red squiggle lines is your computer telling you there's a mistake. And it's because there's no space here. Another issue that I see from students is this. I have a dog. Her name is Lucy. Look, the space is here and the period is at the beginning of the next sentence. In English, we don't begin sentences with punctuation marks like periods. So you need to make sure that your sentences don't look like this. Should look like this. I have a dog, period, space, capital letter. Her name is Lucy. Okay. Rule number three. This first word is a hard word. Abbreviated words need to have a period. There always needs to be a space between words. I'm saying that again. There always needs to be a space between words. And abbreviated words need to have a period. Now, do you know what abbreviated words are? Here are common abbreviations. MR, you probably know this, that's Mr. Mrs., doctor. This also works as drive when you're talking about a different type of street. And then AM and PM, besides being a store at a gas station, AM and PM has to do with time. So here's an example of some abbreviations in a sentence. My name is Mr. Plush. Once again, this is correct for multiple reasons actually, but my name is Mr. Plush. This is incorrect. My name is Mr. Plush, but there's no period here. This sentence actually this sentence reads, my name is Merplush. And no, my name is not Merplush. It's Mr. Plush. You need to have the period there. Also incorrect. My name is Mr. Plush, but no space. You need to have a space here. Whenever there's a period right after it, space. Always remember space after a period. Another mistake that I see from students is instead of putting a period here, I've been seeing students use commas here. You cannot use a comma here. Commas have different rules. So that is incorrect. You need to be using a period after an abbreviation. This is a question mark. To use a question mark, you hold down the shift key and then you push the question mark button. Use a question mark to end an interrogative sentence. That word is interrogative. Or even think about interrogative. So think about the word interrogate, which also means to question, like when you're being questioned about something. So an example is if I say I have a dog, you might ask, what's her name? Even though you know it's Lucy. These are both technically sentences. Everything that you write technically is a sentence. But I have a dog is a declarative sentence because I'm declaring it. And what's her name is an interrogative sentence because it is a question. Both a declarative sentence, which is a sentence, and an interrogative sentence, which is a question, these are both complete sentences. And they can be used together to share detailed information. I'm going to show you a common example that we have seen now in my class multiple times. I have turned in my racer assignment. Will you please grade it? Is that one sentence or more? This is actually incorrect, everybody. This is correct. I have turned in my racer assignment. Period. That's the end of my sentence. Will you please grade it? That's a different sentence. And it's a question. Will you please grade it? Question mark. And I know that it's a question because of this word will. We're going to talk about that more in just a second. Please remember that an indirect question ends with a period, not a question mark. So when a question is direct, you use a question mark. We know this. And these are my question starter words. Who, what, when, where, why, how, and then also words like can or may, sometimes do. Do you know where we're going? Can I use the bathroom? How do you solve this problem? When you see a sentence that begins with one of these words, there's a good chance that it's a question. Therefore, you end the sentence with a question mark, such as, where is my phone? Where is the first sentence? This is a direct question that you're asking somebody. So it's a question mark. Versus when a question is indirect, you need to use a period at the end of the sentence to indicate this. So an indirect question would be, I wonder where my phone is. You're pondering this right now. And you're kind of even asking it to yourself. You're asking it out loud. But since it is not a direct question to another person, you use a period at the end of this sentence. This is an exclamation point. Find an exclamation point. You hold down that shift key. You push the number 1. It gives you that exclamation button. Now, first, I want you to remember in Rule 6, you use periods at the end of sentences that are intended to instruct or command. We usually use periods at the end of imperative sentences or commands. Sometimes we use an exclamation mark to express great emotion. So a declarative sentence, what we learned before, is when we're declaring something. I have a dog. An imperative sentence has a little more urgency to it, and it's a command. So sometimes it's a period. But if you get more emotional, you can use an exclamation mark. So something that maybe you've heard before is a sentence from a teacher when I say, please sit down. When I say please sit down, I'm not asking you to sit down. I'm telling you to sit down. But I'm being nice about it. So I'm going to use a period. But if you're not listening, I might say sit down right now. If I say sit down right now, I might have an exclamation mark at the end of that sentence to show my emotion and the urgency of the situation. Okay, rule number 7. If a sentence ends with an abbreviation that ends in a period, do not follow that with another period. Whew, that's a mouthful. If a sentence ends with an abbreviation, remember, like Mr. or Mrs., and the sentence ends with a period, don't use another period. So, Mary lives on Maple Street. This is correct. You're not going to say Mary lives on Maple Street with a second period there. Similarly, he wakes up at 6 a.m. That's a good sentence. You don't need the second period here. Okay, periods when we're using quotation marks. Periods with quotation marks. If a sentence ends with a quote, the period is placed inside the closing quotation mark. So, Jim said it was just a joke. Jim said it was just a joke. That period is going inside the quote, not out here. Now, if the quotation ends with a quotation mark or an exclamation point, even if it's just a sentence and it's not actually a quote to begin with, the period is left out. So, for instance, Dwight yelled, Michael! Dwight yelled, Michael! Since he yelled it, here's my exclamation mark right there inside my quote. This is correct. You are not going to say Dwight yelled Michael with a second period out here. So I never, ever, ever, ever want to see this double punctuation at the end of a sentence. Okay. Now there is an exception to the rule, and this is periods with citations. Periods with citations are a little bit different, and this is what we're going to be doing when we're writing papers or essays. Okay. If a sentence ends with a citation, the period goes after the citation, not inside the quote. So here's a correct sentence. Charlie said Algernon is a smart mouse. Paragraph 2, period. The sentence begins with Charlie said, comma, my quote, and again, the first word of my sentence is capitalized, so Algernon is a smart mouse. Generally speaking, the period would go right here after mouse. But because I'm using a citation, the period is going to go after the citation, so this P2 isn't hanging out by itself. And I certainly don't want to see you double up. I don't want to see Charlie said Algernon is a smart mouse, period, citation, period. Just the one period at the end. And certainly don't forget to put it there. Don't leave this citation out by itself. Okay? Now, even if a quote ends with a question mark or exclamation point, you leave it out and then you add the period. So even if a quote ends with a question mark or an exclamation point, you leave it out and you add a period. Remember, this is when we're talking about citations. So Lenny followed up by asking, "Can I pet the rabbit?" Page 97. Obviously, if this wasn't page 97, Lenny followed up by asking, "Can I pet the rabbit?" And you would have a question mark here. But I'm using this as a citation, which probably means I'm using this to make a point. And since I'm using this to make a point, I don't need to be using a question when I'm making points. So I'm just putting my period here. I'm not going to, again, do anything like this. Lenny followed up by asking, "Can I pet the rabbit?" Question mark, page 97, period. Okay? These are all of the rules that we are going to be focusing on and looking at with punctuation. Remember, the details matter, everybody. So I want you to be looking carefully at your writing to make sure that your punctuations are in the correct places. Have a good day.